Hello 18 tips I, writing bull, wish I had known from my very first game of ARA, History Untold, which I can now share with you, recorded 2 weeks after the release of ARA with version 1.0.3. In the playlist up there in the corner, among other things, you'll find an extensive review by me, a review talk with the two playtesters from GameStar and PC Games, and many other videos. But first, here are these 18 tips. Tip number 1. Which difficulty level should you start with? There are 10 options ranging from very easy at the top to very hard at the bottom. Attention, this standard difficulty level, the so-called normal, is actually one where the AI is massively cheated by us. That means we get massive bonuses, far more than the text there suggests. That means even for beginners it's way too easy. What I would recommend is to start with Marquis or Prince. What is also not mentioned in the tooltips is that things change as the difficulty levels increase. How well the AI plays depends on its mistakes and the number of bonuses or penalties it gets, which can sometimes be significant. Higher difficulty levels make the game much harder. I recommend Prince for experienced strategy players and Marquis for beginners. Tip number 2. Which of the 5 quality of life values are the ones that really matter? The game overwhelms you. In a flood of information that isn't always well presented and sometimes not explained very well, it's very important to see these quality of life values in the city at the bottom left. These are satisfaction, growth, research, knowledge, prosperity, and security. The bottom 3 are multipliers. Security, which is the multiplier for your army's combat strength within the city limits. Prosperity, a multiplier for how much of the gold generated in the city actually reaches you. And research is also the multiplier for what happens with the research points and how much of what your citizens generate is actually credited to you. The key values at the start of the game with ARA are health and happiness. Why? Health is important because after all, when that growth bar at the top appears, it fills up completely. Usually you get a new zone that you can add to your city, and very often you also get new values in the city, more research, more money, and so on and so forth, and more of these amenities. You get slots, meaning places where you can put goods that your citizens consume and that give you some powerful bonuses for your city. For example, they can produce a lot of food. This growth value up here is significantly influenced the higher the growth value. The faster you grow, the more zones you get and the more your people produce. The second very important value is satisfaction. Satisfaction is the multiplier for how much of the production actually reaches the city. How quickly you can carry out construction projects in the city, place your buildings which then produce goods, and much more. That means at the start with ARA, focus on high growth and high satisfaction, and you'll have made good progress. Tip number 3. Which of the amenities are especially relevant for you? So these goods that the citizens in the cities produce, when you grant them these goods. These are the amenities slots here on the left. My tip would be, make sure this connects to the previous tip, that you provide amenities that generate a lot of production. So in other words, you want to increase this satisfaction value up here, and goods that increase this health value, these are especially relevant and very, very soon in the game. In cities starting with the 2nd, 3rd, or at most the 4th citizen, you may struggle to have enough local food since you might not realize this at first. Food production in your empire. There are 2 pools for this. One is a global pool, which is shown at the top left. Everything that is produced and collected in all cities ends up there. But growth in the city is only possible if the local food production is not in the negative, so at least at break even. If that's the case, it won't help you even if the global pool is big and filling up. If there's a negative down here, then there won't be any growth in the city. Where your city is located, you have to balance that out very early with amenities like these, which can also, for example, produce food locally. A feast, very important for Papadistadt. You can produce it in the Grand Assembly Hall, that's what the city center is called in the capital, or in the smaller city centers in the other cities. Later you'll unlock goods, so pay attention to these goods like grain storage. They're unlocked through the milling technology, gourmet dishes. They're produced in the only inn which you unlock through hospitality and which you can build in one of your cities. And many other goods will be added which benefit the city, not only often for health but also for food. Make sure that the value up here doesn't become negative. Tip number 4. You have your first city, Papadistad, and you're wondering, what should I build there? What's more important, building a spearman for exploration or starting a construction project on site? The latter. Definitely a clear tip. The first building in the city should always be a workshop. You can select it up here in this list. You can also filter this by the individual improvements. These are the terrain upgrades, like a workshop for example. Alternatively, you can also go through the zones. There's a drop-down menu up here. In the zones, the regions in the city are listed, and you can specifically place a workshop in one of those locations. That's mostly for cosmetic reasons, whether you use it or not, unless there are specific resources in the zones like a cotton deposit or a grain deposit. You want to build the upgrade exactly on top of it. With a workshop, none of that matters. Just take one, place it in these areas, and you'll finish quickly. Why is this so important? Because a lot of things in the city, in our area, run through the production of goods. And most, not all, but the really essential ones of these goods are produced in the workshops of your cities. There can be more than one, but you definitely need at least one, otherwise you can't produce anything. And that leads directly to the next tip. Tip number 4. How do you start your research? In round 2, you can choose your first technology that you want to acquire. There's a no-brainer here, that's the rope making. Why? Why that one? First of all, because thanks to rope making, as soon as you build the workshop, you can produce ropes on site, the very first good. And with those ropes, you can boost the workshop again. You can assign such ropes as a good in the workshop itself, which ensures that everything in the workshop is produced 50% faster. That's why the rope making workshop should be the first step. Tip number 6. What is the second building project in your first city after the workshop? A settler? You want to found a second city and expand as quickly as possible, and that sounds much easier than it actually is, because for building your very first settler you need food, and quite a lot of it. Currently, in version 1.0.3, just after release, it's 125 food, but you start with much less. Why am I emphasizing this so much? When building more buildings, units, or anything else, pay attention to whether you're consuming food. And under no circumstances should you set food at the start of the party. To boost the production of such feasts in your starting upgrade at the Great Fireplace, you do need the feasts. Starting with the second citizen, fill the first comfort slot in the city to improve its overall efficiency. He could boost the production of such a feast by spending 2 food per turn, and you can see that the first feast is ready much faster. Don't do that under any circumstances, because then it will take forever for you to get the second settler. So that means collecting food, denying the people the feast, and then expanding. Tip number 7. What is the best distance between 2 cities? I'll give you a clear answer. If you place the cities too close together, that's obviously really bad, because the cities will expand significantly over time. The game sets a city limit based on your government type. You can slightly increase this limit by building a world wonder or palace. In typical games you may have around 10 cities, but you can have more. You can't found more settlers to build cities beyond the city limit, but you can capture and keep foreign cities. But then you'll get a hefty happiness penalty for all your cities with each additional city you have above the city limit. So it's better to stick to the city limits, and that in turn means that cities expand a lot over time and gain a lot of zones and regions. You shouldn't place the cities too close together, but if you put them too far apart, then what you see in this example happens. I played as Mexico City, then I founded Rio Frio, then the Argentinians simply put Girly in the middle. I had thought of the following. Normally you need a claim, that's what it's called in the game, to add another region to a city. Usually, not always, but usually you get a new claim. When the city's growth bar fills up again, you can add a new region. And at some point though, the costs increase. That means starting from 4 tiles away from the region where you began. With your city, so the further you are from your main settlement, you need 2 claims for each new region you want to add. That's why I usually count like this. You can display this more clearly if you turn on the yield icons at the bottom right, then you can see the region borders better. I count from Mexico City 1 region, 2, 3 regions. Those are the ones I could normally claim easily from Mexico City. The next city then once, twice, 3 times, and placing a city tile here would be the optimal distance, I think. Still, I placed a city here, Mar Verde, with only 2 tiles of distance, 1, 2 tiles from Mar Verde, and 1, 2 tiles from Mexico City. And that would also be my tip for you, to do it that way. That prevents a lot of small cities from popping up between you, and you stay relatively compact, can protect yourselves, can... Still, you can usually expand reasonably, maybe even a bit closer together, not just 2 tiles away from each city center, but even a little tighter. And then, in the later game, it could become very, very difficult to continue expanding your cities profitably, but I think that's a good rule of thumb. 2 city tiles away from your city center, count the distance for each city you have and build accordingly. Tip number 8. Be smarter than the ladies and gentlemen politicians in real life. Build housing in time so there is no housing shortage for your citizens. Sometimes I wish some people would play a few more global strategy games before applying for a political office. In other words, here in Silencio, in this city you see, the growth bar is gradually filling up. I've already explained, you need a local supply since growth isn't possible with a food shortage. Here you see 2 values, 6 and 11. The value on the right is the amount of housing you have, the one on the left is what's currently being used. When that's full, if it said 11 out of 11 there, then from one turn to the next, the growth bar would be stopped immediately. Build housing in time. I'll get to it right away. Tip number 9, where should the housing be built? In the city center, so in the central area. Up here where you once founded your city, that's the city zone, and I intentionally left 2 spaces open here. Why do you see now? If you deliberately place an apartment there, you don't just get 3 city housing, but 2 extra on top, because it's the best downtown location. Tip number 10. Ignore mini bonuses that exist in the game, or mini bonuses, or however you want to form the plural. There is an unbelievable amount of stuff you can produce, and there is an unbelievable amount of other stuff you can use to boost the production of that first stuff even more. You drown in the possibilities, don't try everything, don't try to play perfectly. That's impossible if you try to play perfectly and try to produce everything. That doesn't work because you can't even keep up with the insane pace at which research runs in the release version. You can't build all the buildings you've just unlocked, and you can't take advantage of all the possibilities that are available to you. Try to clear the jungle, try to see the trees in the forest, and here's a tip, a very fundamental one. Ignore mini bonuses in the game, even if other users or players might whisper to you about them somewhere on the internet. Hey, cool tip, you can get plus something, a small value, if you use item 10 and Y. A few examples. In apartments in cities, for example, you can set up various products here, some of which are made with a lot of effort. For example, the production of furniture or runners and carpets. These are things that first have to be made in the appropriate businesses, so for example, carpets by weavers or furniture in workshops. They give minimal bonuses. 1 more city production is cool for a very small city, 1 more construction production, 3 more city health, that's real. Is it worth it? Because you can't play perfectly, I usually wouldn't do it. There are plenty of other things you can produce. Another thing here with the amenities on the left, there are the amenity slots. I opened the list if you scroll down. For example, you can produce decorative vases in ceramic shops, and they give you +5. City satisfaction, yes, city satisfaction is an important value. There are many other amenities you can produce that generate even more. Of course, that also depends a bit on which technology level something is unlocked. The later the technologies come, the more powerful the bonuses you get. But look, don't try to produce everything. Try to identify a few things that you have good experiences with. Write those down on a piece of paper. Seriously, the game is so confusing. There's so little quality of life. You have options. Use paper and pen or a digital file, whichever you prefer. Write down the things you figured out at some point and try to actually follow through with them. Tip number 11. If you want food, you need a lot of food for the growth of your city. Don't build farms, at least not unnecessary ones. I know, that's just the reflex in this game. An indicator shouts, "More food please," so you keep building farms over and over. My tip would be, don't build them in areas that only provide food, just the regular food. 3 or 4 food yields on grassland by the river are fine. Then later you can produce items here. For example, you can set a plow in a farm or use other tips as well. You can put in experts, you can do all that, but it's much more efficient to produce items instead. Amenities that you can set up in the city. I showed this at the beginning here on the left. And by doing so, you can produce large food yields in your city. And in a city, for example, do you have fish resources on the water? You can develop them with a fishery and produce fish. Later, you can produce salted fish, or you can bake bread and make other gourmet dishes and other things. And the most efficient method for this is actually to build farms where there are special resources. On the map, bringing in corn, grain, fish, getting livestock, connecting cattle, for example, through farms, and then producing these goods in the appropriate buildings in butcher shops or whatever, or in bakeries. That is usually more efficient than just following your reflex. Hey, I need food. Can I use other strategies? I could just build a farm. You can do that, but in my opinion, it's not the most efficient way. Tip 12. How can you gain a major advantage from the economy in the game? The best overview of where you produce what, under which conditions, where can you optimize that most effectively? Actually, up here on the top right, there's a drop-down menu, and on the left are the production queues. Here you can sort buildings individually. For example, sorting workshops alphabetically lets you see everything at a glance. No matter which city they're in, all the workshops in your entire empire. You can see from the icon what is being produced there, and you can still change the production there. You can set items or salaries in different categories to make things run faster. The only thing you can't do is modify the supplies at the top. For that, you would have to click on it. We'll talk about that in a moment. It's essential, but for now, you already have a good overview. If you think that's not enough for me, I also want to properly check in a city to see what's being produced there. There you also have a drop-down menu shown here with Mexico City as an example. You have, as I showed at the beginning, the zones, meaning the regions that are divided into zones. You can look at things individually. You can also identify supplies and resources in the city that you haven't properly developed yet. Here is the white-tailed deer. Building a hunting camp there gives you access to resources. Where can you find them specifically? Much more important for goods production are, first of all, the upgrades. All upgrades are listed in the city, including housing, for example. Everything that produces is divided. Unfortunately, the German translation is a bit odd. Into harvesters and artisan harvesters. This isn't about what produces food, but rather all the upgrades that produce raw materials. And among the artisans you have all the finished goods factories, finished goods operations, so all those that further process resources into finished goods. Just be careful, because it's a bit peculiar in the game, since almost everything, not everything, but almost everything in the game, you can make them without owning any resources or raw materials. So you can also make gourmet dishes or salted fish or whatever, without having fish, or without having bread, or without having grain. You can only speed up production with these raw materials except for units or World Wonder Triumphs, which are the game's exception. Sometimes we need certain goods so that these units or these triumphs can be produced. You can't trick those, but with these buildings you can't always, but usually you can also advance production there without having the raw materials. And that drop-down menu would be a good tip to help you get attention and an overview. Here's tip number 13. Knock on wood and spit over your shoulder if you're superstitious. Hope this goes well. Tip number 13. Which goods are the most important ones to produce in the city? Amenities refer to the goods you provide your citizens, which is already settled. They should be ones that provide food, health, and satisfaction in the largest possible quantity. But there are also goods that you have to produce for the city in order to make certain other belt numbers, belts, or to boost your businesses, or whatever else. The goods overview at the top is now in the second categories, which feels overwhelming. We're transitioning from early to mid-game, moving from the first to the second stage. There's Act 3, and these lists, there are an incredible number of things that you're producing here. If you hover over it, you can see in which city it's produced, but you can't switch to the city from this overview. That doesn't work. I already showed you an overview here in the production queue. Which goods are the most important? Generally speaking, aside from amenities, it's the goods you use to boost your workshops. We had a simple example at the beginning, unlocking rope making as a technology, producing ropes, and assigning them to the workshops. And that's also a general tip for later in the game. All the goods you use to boost your workshops are already good goods, so for example right here at the front. Here you see 2 slots where you have certain goods to choose from that you can assign. Take a look at the tooltip. Over time, other goods become available. The tooltip at the bottom says, for example, gears work better than ropes. And you can check these things in all your production facilities. So for example, later on in bakeries as well, you click on a bakery and check the slots you have at the top and whether you have the goods you can set there. So I would always produce the goods your workshops need as the first step, and in the second step, the goods that other production facilities need as supply materials. To make sure everything runs optimally up here, you should prioritize producing these items except for the amenities, of course. If the market on the left is working, it's not really necessary, but pay attention to the supplies at the top right. You can't go wrong with that. Tip number 14. Use the synergy effects of buildings that boost each other. Sometimes these are buildings of different types, so for example, it can happen that a granary boosts the food yields of farms, of farmhouses in the same region. You know, the map is divided into such regions, and those are further divided into individual zones. Combinations, multiple food-producing farms and a granary. It can be cool, but what's actually much more important is that there are certain buildings, production buildings, that mutually boost each other's production. So, for example, 3 bakeries were built here in one region for a reason, and a 4th is being added because of bakeries. You can see this in the construction queue tooltip when you hover over it. Plus 25 artisanal production is given to all other bakeries in the same region. That means keeping regions free for yourself, large regions. And by stacking these buildings like that, forming a local monopoly can be very, very efficient. Always keep an eye on that as well. Certain buildings like bakeries, for example, you can only build a certain number of them per nation, meaning per civilization. 6 are possible. Other buildings can be built only once per city or once for the whole civilization. So always pay attention to these limits and then happy puzzling. Tip 15. Unfortunately, this part is a bit complicated, but I'll simplify it as much as I can. How do you figure out which research you can skip and which research you should skip? The game is divided into 3 acts. If you click on the research screen at the top right and then again down here on this grey menu, you'll see an overview of your library. This here is Act 1, then there's Act 2 and the 3rd one. Each act is split into 4 technological eras, making 12 in total. And if you want to advance from one of these eras to the next, you just need to have researched a certain number of technologies. 5, for example, here on the left, to then move over into the Bronze Age and so on. That sometimes tempts you to skip certain technologies. Careful, you can't catch up on those later, unlike in millennia, for example, where you can still catch up on the old ones pretty quickly and easily even when you're in a new era. That's not possible here. Once you've made your decision, they're gone, and that might also mean certain goods or specific units that were unlocked by those technologies are gone as well. But some of the goods and some of the units or the world wonders or whatever, or the forms of government, You can unlock them through various technologies, early, mid, late, or a combination of two early ones. That's terrible, confusing, but important. It's important to deal with it. And you really can only do that by reading a lot, comparing things, looking at tooltips and so on. An example from early history pretty far down is fermentation. Fermentation unlocks the ability to produce wines in fermentation pits, and wines in turn, if you scroll down, you can see in the bottom left. They can be unlocked through hospitality, this technology, or through fermentation, and hospitality in turn comes right after that. Hospitality is already available in the Iron Age. It's listed here at the front. That means if you don't absolutely want wine right away, there's no real reason for it, then maybe you should just wait 2 ages. At the bottom left, skip fermentation, then unlock hospitality. That's also super important because then you can build the inn and use gourmet dishes early in the game. Super cool amenities for your cities. I know this because I've read a lot, checked tooltips and looked things up again and again. And looked things up in the Encarta. It's in the top right, that's the in-game encyclopedia. And there's a search field in the top left. And when you look things up, like wine for example, you can view it and then look at it in detail as well. For example, you can see how their production can be sped up, like what you can put into the fermentation pit so the wines are finished earlier and so on. And I know it's confusing, but when it comes to min-maxing and the enjoyment you get from min-maxing in the game, there's no way around it. Having to look up things like that over and over again in a complicated way. Why this is so important among other things, and why you can never get it perfect anyway. Also an example from my own painful experience. Late in the game I discovered a super cool wonder that I wanted to build, but I had overlooked the chariots here in the game. Because I realized I didn't necessarily need that unit, I could unlock other cavalry units later on. But a wonder that you build later, that you need later. For that, you need exactly 1 chariot, and the chariot is actually only unlocked by this chariot technology. And yes, it's complicated. And no, you have to decide for yourselves, I can't do that for you. How thoroughly do you want to deal with it? So you really have to estimate which technology you might want, deal with it individually, and study the tooltips. When is something unlocked in which technology? When does it become available in later eras, and so on and so forth? Tip number 16. When waging war, pay attention to materials when positioning your troops. This is very important and not just a generic term in the game. It's one of the resources displayed in the top left, the standard resources in a game. Eventually you'll want to raise troops when you realize you can build in the game. You can build cities or let others build them and take them, which might be more efficient. That's what you can raise a military for. Up here in the build menu, by the way, you have the option to display all available troops using this saluting symbol. And as you can see at a glance, a lot of early units need materials. Nothing works without them. You'll likely need an army plus ongoing maintenance costs. Don't just recruit a unit on a whim, but only when you specifically want to launch an attack. A lot of them one after another, so you'll need them quickly in succession if you're building armies in many cities, starting troops in many cities at the same time. A lot of materials in stock, and if you haven't paid attention and it's a dead end that could be reached, then maybe you don't have these materials in large quantities in stock, because you boosted your workshops there. For example, here in Mar Verde you can also display it here. Metal tool production is crucial in the game since they're also used as workshop supplies. You can boost their production by sending in materials every round so that they're produced faster. There are often alternatives as well. If you want to raise an army soon, use the alternatives to boost here or wherever you need. Because without materials, without a stockpile, there's no way to raise a large strong army at the beginning of the game. Tip number 17. You want to raid your neighbors. What is the best way to raise strong armies? So how should you group your units? How should you assemble your armies? In the background, I'm specifically showing Buenos Aires in the game with Mexico so I can show you how cool it can be to raid your neighbors. In this case, the Argentinians. The wonder down here, for example, is always a potential big prize. When you raise troops, in Arrest to Untold they go into the pool. That means they first end up here in the reserves. And later you can then raise troops, that is raise battalions. You can only create a limited number of land units, which increases over time. Initially you start with just 3. For example, through technologies, research and forms of government, you can then increase the number of armies. That leads to the first point. Train of thought. The more units you can put into an army, the better, because armies are limited and you can't upgrade units. In retrospect, at least in the release version of Arrest to Untold, you can't unlock cooler unit types or upgrade existing units with a lot of experience points to newer technological units. That's not possible in the release version of ARA. The number of armies is also limited, which means the stronger the armies are, the better. And there you have different options, different formations that you unlock over time, and they create different numbers of unit slots. My simple tip for you: think simple, don't think sophisticated, don't try to be clever, just try to be straightforward. War is about force. That means try to choose formations where you can fit as many units as possible and put in the strongest units you have. Go by that bull symbol, the strength symbol that's there. The more strength points a unit has, the more you should put it on the left. Of course, the game recommends you to think strategically. For example, when you do certain other things, you can combine certain units together. 2 melee cavalry units, 2 poictile units, and then there's some kind of bonus here that you can choose, like plus 10 strength, for example. These bonuses aren't that strong. I wouldn't even bother with that. I would always just look very pragmatically at what are the strongest troops I have that I can put into the biggest possible army. Put a lid on it, that's it. Unfortunately, in the long run, that's not the smartest. I mean, not the most sophisticated strategy, but it is the smartest because it's the most efficient. And what could be the smartest strategy to really efficiently bring one of your neighbors to their knees in a war? Attention, the upcoming 18th tip is so simple. Once you know it, it's shockingly simple. Think carefully about whether you want to listen. Now you're curious. Okay, then I'll explain it. You have a neighboring city that's bothering you. You need to get your borders as close as possible. If your borders touch the neighboring city, you unlock what's called an expansion war, which means a possible reason for war. In the diplomacy menu under Declare War, the types of wars are listed. Click on Expansion War, then click on the neighboring city that's bothering you and that you want to take over. And then you have to invest a few prestige points, which are the points you win with at the end if you have more than everyone else. You can also reduce the turn limit, for example, which means you have to spend fewer prestige points. If you capture this city within the turn limit, then the war is over immediately. From one turn to the next, and you get an incredibly huge prestige reward. As additional loot, besides this city before capturing it, you can also conquer, plunder or destroy other cities as you wish. Odermatt is super simple, he gets the war here for just a few points. Here you are at war, maybe you have your troops stationed nearby and you march into the city. After the turn change, the declaration of war reaches the other side. You start conquering the city, possibly defeating some defenders first, then capture it. With overwhelming superiority, it takes only a few turns. The moment you capture the city, the war is immediately over. From one moment to the next, you gain major prestige points, but can't declare war again for 20 turns. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Those were my 18 tips for beginners in ARA History Untold. If you have more tips, feel free to write them below in the text description on YouTube. Maybe I'll make more videos. If you have more questions about the game, feel free to ask them below. You can also coach each other, you don't have to wait for me. A few more videos are shown in my playlist above. In the corner, you'll also find, among other things, a long match. I recorded a review discussion with game testers, and many other videos about ARA can also be found here. If you're interested, feel free to subscribe and click the bell, then you'll be notified about future videos. Have fun with ARA.